Welcome to Life Lessons in Lattes. You are now viewing episode 4, Overcoming Your First Heartbreak. I am joined today by a very special guest, and we are discussing, as I said, chapter 4 of my book, In Maximizing Her, which was released earlier this year under my own publishing company. And this book largely discusses all things womanhood, tradition, legacy, and life as we women know it. So to get into it, I would love to introduce to you my very, very special guest, who I affectionately call Mom Tour, but Dr. Lynn Marie Reynolds. I just gave you a government.
I'm glad to be here. I mean, really, you did.
I did, but tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Reynolds.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this chapter in your life.
Thank you.
I am an educator, leader, year 29 for me. I'm a twin, and I am one of 7. I am a transplant to Louisville and been here 12 years. My blood runneth red in Kentucky, but it runneth orange in Tennessee.
Okay, and what part of Tennessee?
Lebanon, Nashville area.
Okay, so I have some family in Nashville as well.
Yes.
All right. Well, and I actually met Dr. Reynolds at Central High School. Central High School has been such a powerful network of connections in my life. And so I met you there, and from there you have nurtured me and have just given me the maternal guidance and development that, I've needed. So thank you for being that for me.
Well, Central is the birthplace of a lot of that, but when I got to Central, I felt like I found home and a place where I found girls that I could mentor. So you were one of those special ones.
Y'all hear that? Okay, well, let's get right into it, Mom Tour.
Okay.
So we're talking about heartbreak. And I know for my viewers who are tuned into these episodes, you're probably like, oh my goodness, right? But I told you guys, this book is all things life as us women know it. And love is definitely one of those things that is definitely a staple in the life of young women. So I am proud to announce, though, that this is the last chapter discussing love more so. Then we will advance on to the bigger conversation of how to lead your life and things, of, I would say, higher nobility. So overcoming your first heartbreak, when was your heart first broken? If you could dig in and tell us that.
That really is it's a simple question, but it's also complicated because you always ask yourself, did you really know about love at 10 years old when you had a crush on someone? So I would say probably 11 or 12 when I really liked someone in junior high. But that really wasn't the heartbreak that I would prefer to discuss today.
Okay, for sure.
The one that I prefer to discuss would be the real one that got to the core of me.
Would it be safe to say that this was in your womanhood now?
This is when I was in my 20s.
Okay.
And I was dating a guy that I had dreamed and decided we were going to get married, and we talked about marriage a lot. And I had saved myself for that, and I was really excited about the opportunities because love is good. When you're in love, everything is good, and the birds sing better, and the flowers are prettier. Everything is grand. So you're all excited about being in love anyway. But long story short, moving to the heartbreak, this guy and I were, destined to be married and had planned a wedding. And Super Bowl night, one year, we broke up. And before that, though, things were going south, around about 3 to 4 months before that, things were changing. But get into the heartbreak part, I won't ever forget it. I went to my mom's, and it was after the game on Sunday night, which my family member hosts a party, and he didn't go with me. And so when we got back together after the game, we were talking and wondering why we were going on different paths. Long story short, we broke up that night. And I went to my mom's and was in tears, swollen eyes, because I had a wedding dress. I had this beautiful, I've been planning my wedding since I was like 7. And I had
to know her is to know that she is a planner down to the smallest detail.
Yes, I am. I like to plan things, and you don't plan heartbreak.
You do not plan heartbreak.
And long story short, though, it was one of the saddest times, most difficult times. And the next morning, I had to go to work, and I wanted to stay home. My mom was like, no, you get up, put your best outfit on, and you go to work. Well, I got to work that morning, and one of the little students came to my desk, and tears were rolling, and my eyes were all swollen. And he said, Miss Reynolds, this too shall pass.
Wow.
And
what grade were you teaching, just to cue them?
I was teaching 5th grade, so it was a 10-year-old. And I sat there at my desk, I got myself together, and I got up and started teaching the children.
This too shall pass. Wow.
It was one of the most profound moments of my life, and it has since helped me keep everything in perspective when things around you are going awry.
For sure.
Yeah.
And one reason why I was so happy to have you discuss this particular chapter with is because you're experienced and you've lived some life. So you've been through things that are tried and true. And whereas, my other guest, yes, they have experience, but we're still very young.
Yes.
So we're still kind of putting our own ideas to the test.
Yes.
But you've lived, so you can honestly say, this too shall pass, and have some stories to point back to and say, look how I survived this. And
it really is a catapult to launching that mind of there's gonna be some good days and there's gonna be some bad days, but life does get better, and everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
And so I live with that premise anyway. I don't believe in coincidence. It is positioned in purpose.
Yeah.
So. And
I can even say there have been times when you have nursed me when I was going through what I thought back then was heartbreak, but now it was like, girl.
Seriously. Yeah, that's
seriously.
Exactly.
And so I can say that her guidance that she will give today is tried and true, because I remember this was probably like 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
And one guy that I really thought was
you had
the one.
Idea.
I had the idea that this guy was the one, and you were telling me what I couldn't see myself, but now at the age of being a 24-year-old woman, it's like, girl, that was so far off the mark,
But in your 20s, you are, because, if you think about it, you create this vision and this perfect life for yourself. And that would be great if no one else was involved and you could control all of their behaviors and actions and feelings. But since you can't, you kind of, got to get to a place of, okay, that idea is not best. And once, I live from the mantra of Nelson Mandela, I never lose. I either win or I learn. And I may not have won in love in that situation, like you didn't win in love, but you learned, and it usually launches you into learning a lot about yourself, the things you want and the things you don't.
Yes, and that's so true, because right after that heartbreak, maybe a year later, when I stopped intentionally focusing on how do I make this idea work with this guy, I ended up meeting someone that God had for me that was so much better.
Yes.
So much. The things that I would have begged the other guy to do, the other guy just did effortlessly. And so there is life after heartbreak.
Yes.
But talking about heartbreak, what makes a heartbreak hurt so bad?
Well,
it knocks,
it can take the wind out of you.
It does.
What makes it hurt so bad?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
It crushes that human spirit.
Well, and I think because we put so many of our ideas, our hopes, our dreams, our future, we put so much pressure on those things that are not really things, and make it so heavy. So then when heartbreak happens, you are in that place of everything changes in your life. All the ideas and moments that you had pictured are now no longer going to be part of your narrative. And so getting used to that makes everything so much heavier. But I'll tell you, you know, over half your age and whatever, that gets better, because you learn also not to put so much pressure on the things that you think are going to make your life.
Yes.
So that you ask why it's so painful, why it's so hurtful. It's because everything that you know you've put into that hope, to that future, to that being, and then it's not what it is. And then so what do I do now? It's like when someone dies in your life, and I mean, they're your family, they're your heart, you love them. You can't imagine this life without them moving forward. And you don't know what to do with yourself the next day, because for however long, that's all you've done. So when you're in a relationship and you've given it everything you have, that's all you've done.
Yeah.
So that's why it's difficult to transition, but healing does come.
Yes. And I want to revert back to what you said earlier. You said that you had a wedding dress in early 20s.
No, not early 20s. No, I was probably 27.
27
to 28.
What did you do with the wedding dress?
Well, I kept it for years. I fell in love with that dress. It was everything that I had hoped for. I was one of those girls that cut out pictures out of a magazine or the Sears catalog, and I'm aging myself, but I'm okay with that. And I would make scrapbooks of all these ideas of what I was going to do and what I was going to wear, and I found the dress that I loved. And I drove like 180 miles to get it. Only one store had it in Tennessee, in West Tennessee, and I drove to purchase it. And when that dress wasn't going to come to fruition, I was never really going to use it if I was going to get married in the next year, which I didn't, or whatever. I was not going to wear that dress because it had been purchased for that purpose. And so years down the road, I have a goddaughter. I've not birthed any children through my own womb, but I have definitely birthed children through my heart. And I have a goddaughter, and I have the nieces, and so I've had the opportunity to, mother women, and young girls. And my goddaughter was getting married. She got married, I think, 2009, so she's almost married 10 years. And maybe 2008, I can't remember. And we cut it up and used it. She was gonna wear it and just have it created for her, but it was gonna be too much money, and she could just buy her own dress. And so we used it for art, just little details in her wedding, and every one of her programs was part of that, had that wedding dress. Every the flower girl, little flower holder had that wedding dress. A lot of the bows that were connected, the lace that was connected, was part of her wedding that day. So it was used for extra projects.
Was it therapeutic for you to use it in that fashion, almost like a release?
I would say I was well over it by then. So I don't know that I was still...
And just for people who may be tuning in, can you put a timestamp on it now?
Well, that was probably about let's see, that was 98, maybe 97, 98. You're talking about she got married in 2009 or 10. And so you're talking about 98 to 2008 would be 10 years. And then, so about 10 to 12 years was the length of time for that. So I was over it. I had dated someone else a few years after that. And I mean, we didn't get to that stage of marriage or anything, but I was over the wedding dress and what the thing that never happened. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted the dress. A lot of times my little nieces play dress up in it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I was over it. So no, it wasn't really therapeutic in releasing it. What was helpful, and you may call it therapeutic, was that something that I owned and loved so much was part of her wedding. So it wasn't really about healing from the breakup. It was more about sharing part of my narrative with her for her wedding day. You know, something old, something new. So I think that was really what it was more about than anything.
Yeah. And I think for me, giving my 24-year-old answer to why does heartbreak hurt so bad, you know, it resembles your answer. I think it's because it's the unwinding of a dream. You know, it's that one thread that comes loose and then you just watch everything else unravel. And then you're left to pick up pieces and create a new world. And as simple as that sounds, right, yeah, when you have to put it into practice, like knowing that your whole world has just been obliterated inside you, inside your mind, and the way that you perceive the world, then having to go and put on a smile and go back to work, or still be that same friend, or be that
show
same...
up with at church. And
oh, that's the worst.
It was the worst.
That is the worst, because sometimes, especially if you are in a position of leadership or ministry, you're expected to minister to other people while you're dealing with your own pains and your own wounds.
Yes.
So yes, that's very, very hard. Okay, let's see. You said that your mother told you, no, you're going to work the next day. Why do you think she told you that?
Well, let me say, and I do want to always give a shout out to my mom. My mom was a single mom, never graduated from high school, but is still the smartest woman I know. She was in an abusive relationship with our dad, and our dad died when we were in kindergarten. So for the duration of my life, we were only, my mom was our mom and our dad. And because my mom wanted me to grow up in this space of independence and you make sure you can always take care of yourself, she never allowed me to wallow long in a space. But in her world, and she used to say this, and she said, well, what do you think about those poor slaves? And it would irritate me. And I'd be like, we're not in slavery time, mama. And, you know, she would just, yeah, well, I mean, women been doing that for years. I mean, what you want me to do about that? And her motto was, I don't care how bad things are, you get up, you put on your best outfit, and you go out into the world, because the world doesn't stop just because you're suffering. And I think it helped me become more human in the sense of...
That's good. That's good.
In
Keep
the
going.
sense of when you suffer heartbreak,
yes,
you are more sensitive to others that suffer heartbreak.
Yes.
And I think I know my mom knew that because she suffered heartbreak. She loved my dad. He was fun. And whenever in her latter years and before her death, I'd ask her questions, now how did you and daddy fall in love? And she'd just get this nostalgic look on her face and cross her legs and chew on her tongue. And she'd say, oh, he just made me laugh. And that was really good for me in knowing that what I knew about him in being abusive was also that space of she fell in love with the good of him.
Yeah.
And she never wanted me to be a person that allowed life to get the best of me. She wanted me to always know, I don't care what's happening, you got to get up and put your clothes on.
Yes. Wow. You just said a mouthful, and I want to dig into that. But if you haven't already been able to tell, right, you are a woman that's very accomplished. Okay? Traveled the world. Where are some places you've traveled?
Well, I have a bucket list. I want to go to all 7 continents. Weird, I know. But when your life doesn't turn out like you thought it should have, I wanted to be married and have a set of twins and all of those things. And when life didn't turn out that way, you create new dreams and new paths and new journeys. And I got the opportunity about 12 years ago when I moved to Kentucky, and that was a leap of faith that really has opened up my life. And my first overseas trip outside of the Caribbean, of Mexico or the Bahamas, was to Europe. And I got the bug that day. And so I've traveled many places in Europe, Switzerland and Paris and Germany and Belgium, and several different stops in Europe. And I love Europe and Italy. I love all of it. I love seeing different cultures, and it makes me realize that we're just very small specks in the world, even though our lens is like in our own world. But I've traveled to Europe. I've been to now 4 continents, Europe, Asia, Africa, and United States. So I have, or North America. And so I have Australia, Antarctica, and whatever's left. What is that? Asia. I've been to Asia. I've been to Africa, Australia, Antarctica. I think I have a third one though. Whichever one is that.
Yeah. I'm a visual learner,
so she's not talking about
Okay. But all of that, if you can just imagine that, she's taken on all of that in her life. And that's not even to mention just what an intellectual you are. I
don't know if I could say I was an intellectual.
I will say that she is. Okay. We were talking the other day, and she was, this is not the other day. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. And I'll never forget it, because just talking to her, it's almost like just skimming through a dictionary. And she was telling me a disagreement she had with a colleague. And she's like, pedagogically, did I say that correct?
Yeah.
I would have to disagree with you there. And I'm like, pedagogically, what does that mean? And she told me, now I go around saying, you know what, pedagogically, I'm going to have to disagree with you right there.
Oh my goodness.
So,
for you that don't know, that is just theories of teaching and learning. So, to put it simply.
So she's a very accomplished woman. Did you find that going through your heartbreak, or whenever you have a disappointment and heartbreak, people will feel the need to say, or they think that somehow this armor of achievement should shield you from that reality? Like, well, you travel the world. Why are you crying over that? Or,
yeah, I
you're
do
so
get that
smart.
a lot.
Why, how does that make you feel?
Well, first of all, I never like for anything people to devalue what anyone is going through, because you don't know their story.
Right.
And I am reminded of that myself also. And I try to make sure that I'm in tune to that. But let me be clear. Yes, I have had the opportunity to get education. And education was a big deal for me. I grew up in the projects, and there was one thing that I never wanted to do. I never wanted to be poor, because we were poor. And my mom instilled, she didn't get to graduate from high school. So it was very important to her that we, Glenn and myself, and all of my brothers and sisters would graduate from college and do well in school. And early on, I found Glenn is the easy, laid back one, and everybody prefers him. It's just that way. He was born with long eyelashes, curly hair, straight teeth. I was born with knotty hair, short eyelashes, minimum eyebrows, and buck teeth, of which my mom could not afford to do braces, and that was years before the government would pay for children that couldn't have braces. They didn't even pay for our glasses. So, long story short, Glenn was the preferred child, and I remember that I would get recognized or have space when people knew how smart I was, or that I would make straight A's, or that I would read, or whatever. And so that was my early reasons for that. But degrees and travel does not feel a heartbreak.
Can you say that again for the people in the back? I
am very pleased, and I'm grateful to God that He's allowed me to have these opportunities, because I am a believer that every good and perfect thing comes from God, and He has aligned my life so that I could, I graduated with my master's at 24, first master's, and then I got a second one, 10 years later, and then, moving here, I got a doctorate, and then I got an opportunity to study at Harvard. And I am grateful for those opportunities, but those things don't feel a void in your heart. And everybody wants to be loved, and everybody wants to love. So yes, people will say, well, girl, you travel the world. You don't need none of that. Why are you crying about that? Why are you worried? Because I still have a desire to be married. I'm not ashamed of that.
Yes.
But I am mindful. I don't want young women particularly to think that that a degree or a paper would ever fulfill that. However, I do think you should stay busy, because you don't know where your life is going. And opportunities come when you have credentials.
Ooh, that's very good, as she always tells me.
Yes.
In a motherly fashion.
Yes. And I'm unapologetic about it.
Yeah, very unapologetic about it. And that's one thing that I love about you. You never are afraid to bring any part of yourself into a room.
No. I want people... My mom told me, and this is one of the things that I didn't get it when she told me back in the day. Like you didn't get things that I told you 5 years ago or 7 years ago. Yeah. And you won't get what I've told you last month until a certain time. But the thing that I am reminded of is that when I told my mom one day, well, everybody prefers Glenn anyway. My mom sat back and she was, I'm sure, thinking that she's going to go rogue on me or whatever. And then she was like, that may be true. But you don't ever have to apologize for who God created you to be. And that right there, even though it was a tiny seed, it was a sprout that grew that I didn't even recognize then when she told me, but I don't have to apologize for who God created me to be. And I do have to grow and learn and not be hateful sometimes and all of those things. But no, I think, I'm unapologetic about the path that God has for me. And I don't have to change that to be accepted.
Yeah. Very good. And I think what I really want from this, series, especially making it intergenerational, is that women could see you don't have to be apologetic. It is okay not to compartmentalize yourselves. We talk about that often.
Yes.
It's like, how can I be strong and independent and want to pursue an education and want to be career focused, but yet still pursue love and want to be that feminine woman, to your guy, and just want love, but be strong in all of that. So
that's a very, to be real to the people who are listening and whoever's going to need this one day, it can be a cautionary tale. I am a strong, independent woman, and as much as I love my mom and what she taught me and the strength that she gave me, I don't know that she gave me, no, I do know that she didn't really prepare me to not be that woman that was vulnerable at times, that needs to show a weakness at times, and that sometimes everybody just needs to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And I learned that late, I think. I learned that, I wish I had learned it in my 30s, but I don't think I learned it to my mid 40s, and which is just within the last 10 years. And for advice for young women that are trying to be all of those things, I mean, simply my advice is, one, be true to yourself, to who you are, because you always have to live with who you are, but don't be so hard on yourself either. Don't don't put it in concrete. Sometimes you need to put a line in the sand. And I am one of those that probably in my 20s put a lot of lines in concrete.
You know what I'm thinking of? The song that started queuing up in my head was Natalie Cole's I'm Catching Hell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You have to listen to it to understand what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, when I, went through my first heartbreak, my first real, major heartbreak, I found it hard to talk to people and to be vulnerable, because I felt that people took it as a joke. Like, oh, you don't have a right to feel down on yourself because you are author, or, oh, you have so much going for you, or you're so pretty, or, you know how pretty you are, you're going to find another guy so quick.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like it's one of the worst things you can say to someone. So for me, it just felt easier to be cocooned within my own pain and not hear those reinforcements of, you don't have the right to allow your heart to be broken. Like, who are you to tell me, how to handle my heartbreak? But what is one of the worst things you can tell someone going through a heartbreak? What is, like when people die, there are just certain things you don't say, like everything happens for a reason. Do not say that. Yeah. What are some of the other cautionary things that you do not say to someone going through a heartbreak? And maybe they don't have the maternal guidance at home, or, that nursing or that nourishment, to get them through. What are some things you could say to them?
Well, first of all, when someone's suffering a heartbreak, it may sound good. Oh, you'll find another one down the street next week. That to me is you don't hear me and you don't see me, because I don't need to know what's going to happen a year from now or down the street around the corner. Right now, I just prefer someone says, you know what, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you're going through that. So I don't know that there are different sentences to say to someone going through a heartbreak, except for, I see you, I recognize your pain, and I'm sorry that you're going through this.
Yeah, very good.
But at the end of the day, this too shall pass.
Very good. I would probably say the same thing. For me, I'm a listener. I don't really like to spout out, okay, here's the cure for what you're going through, because truth is, you don't know. And I was actually telling one of my girlfriends the other day, I was telling her, I was like, she was going through something, and I said, I really wish there was more that I could offer you, but the only thing that I can say is, I'll pray for you, and just to keep seeking positivity every day that you're going forward. And maybe you'll just live your way into the answer. And that worked for her, instead of me dreaming up some fancy answer that was pretty, but it was just empty offerings.
Yeah, I agree.
So sometimes say nothing, just be there. Be present. Tell us, how does heartbreak change you?
Well, it does change you. So if someone says it doesn't, it's not true. It changes a lot of things. It changes the direction. It changes the ideas of your life. You learn a lot about yourself. And I think heartbreak teaches you a lot about the world. We tend to create a perfect world for ourselves. And heartbreak teaches you that it's not perfect. Heartbreak teaches you that I need to extend some grace more because you want grace extended to you.
Yeah.
And so I have learned as I've grown up and matured is that people need grace. And I can extend it longer than I think is necessary that myself would do. But God has taught me extend grace a little bit longer, extend it again a little bit longer. Not when someone is hurting you, or I don't want you to ever misunderstand that. But outside in the world, people show up every day broken. And we are a world of broken people. And people look at me in my life. I travel the world. I have a perfect little, sweet little dog. I, have a good family. I have a lot of friends. I'm blessed. But there are days that I'm lonely and, want my life to be different. That I don't always enjoy going to events by myself as a single woman when other people are always booed up. I mean, it is it's also a hard life to live because like right now I'm struggling with a car and, a flat tire and, you have to take care of everything in your life. So those things, I don't want people to think that just because your life or people's lives look like they've got it going on or whatever. I think about the Obamas and, even for Trump and Melania. I mean, I feel sadness for this life of some of them. So you don't know what people are showing up to do every day in spite of what they look like or what it looks like how much money they have in the bank or what kind of clothes they wear or how their hair is, or you don't know what's under the shell or what they have to go home to the next day or that evening.
For sure. And I think our generation, millennials, I think we're being good at being more aware of that. We are a social media generation. And so a lot of times we have the advantage to see into other people's lives through only a small window. And then we can create a whole narrative like, oh, they have money because they went on this trip, or, oh, their relationship is so perfect, or, oh, her skin is so perfect. She must have the best self-esteem. And I think we are getting into the habit, or at least having the awareness to say, everything may not be as it seems.
I remember a conversation you and I had about Beyonce and Jay-Z. I was like, oh my goodness, Lanisha.
And I think, okay, wait, bookmark that because I want to come back to that. So for me, I will go ahead and tell you, Heartbreak for me, what it did for me, it shattered my innocence, but probably in a good way because I think I was very green. Like I think I assumed, let's see, I was reading a book today. It's called The Compound Effect. Have you read that?
No.
So basically there's a chapter and it says that there is your world and then there's the world.
Oh, yeah.
And you tend to assume that your world is synonymous to the world at large.
Yes.
So in my mind, I was like, all men are faithful. Marriage is the perfect sanctuary for women. And once you get married, all your disappointments, your loneliness jogs to a slow close. And so I was just like, just imagine marriage for, a woman, but then a woman who's kind of like the crown jewel of all women. It's like Beyonce. I mean, she has the physique, she has the money, she has the status, she has the talent. Like, her life must be perfect. Her marriage must be perfect. I mean, let's be honest, she's a sex symbol. And one thing I love about Beyonce is although she's created this career as being a sexy woman, and she, is unapologetic about it, you don't hear scandals about her out here being promiscuous or being inappropriate. I think she's very responsible with her sexuality. So, and that's my way of kind of defending when people say, well, why would you look up to someone like Beyonce?
Oh, I like Beyonce.
She's great. I mean,
Yeah,
a woman who has sustained a 20-plus year career, nearly scandal-free. Either she has a great Olivia Pope on her team, or the woman is just, I mean, America's sweetheart.
Well, and I love Beyonce too. I mean, I respect her craft. I respect her womanhood. I respect her challenges, and I respect her vulnerability, probably more than I do anything else. But I remember our conversation one day.
I didn't bring it to a full circle yet.
I'm sorry.
So that is to say, and also in a way, I feel like Beyonce kind of raised me, because when my mom wasn't there, it was me and the magazine just going through. So I would flip through magazines, even for prom, and say, you know, like, well, what did Beyonce wear at, you know, this gala, or what did she wear to the awards? And I would go through and kind of try to design dresses like her. I mean, if anyone walked in my room as a child, they'd be like, this girl is crazy. It was just like a wall just plastered of Beyonce. So I would watch her interviews. That's how I learned interviewing skills, how to answer questions. She basically raised me. So I have a huge admiration for her that's matured year after year. So when she got married, I was like, okay, I want a guy like Jay-Z now. Like, I want him to be an entrepreneur. I want him to have that grit. He came from struggle. Like,
you want him to be a little bit of thug.
A little bit of thug, you feel me? But, you know, can still walk in. I mean, he did an interview with Warren Buffett.
Yes.
I'm like, how does a guy from Brooklyn, who was on a street corner slinging rock, sit down, probably wearing Armani suit, like, sitting down with Warren Buffett, talking deals, talking money? So I'll say all that to say, I dreamed up this, not even meeting Beyonce, not meeting Jay-Z, just literally knowing them through the
social media and magazines and
interviews.
TV.
I dreamed up the perfect marriage for them. So when people would say Jay-Z cheats on her, I'm like, shut up. There is no way he would ever do such a thing. I mean, literally, I would bet my entire savings account, like, that is one of the most
that's the best marriage in the world. The
proof marriages you could ever have. And to everybody else who lives in the larger world, it was probably obvious to them that a man who has that level of status and then the personal freedoms to kind of do whatever he wants, it's easy how that could happen to him, how he could be susceptible to, you know, those, you know, things. But in my world, mind you, I'm innocent. I'm like, no, man, don't do that. And then it came out. Very much so he did that. So, okay, now you can explain to them how naive I used to be.
Well, not really naive, but it was concerning. I remember going, it made you go pause. Because I'm like, really? I mean, she's one of the smartest girls I know. And she really believed that now if something happens to Jay-Z and Beyonce, I am just giving up on love. And I was like,
yeah,
really?
That's how serious it was.
And I was like, oh, then we need to start having some different kind of conversations. But I mean, I knew that life would teach you what it needed to teach you. And that's, to be real, that's what life does, and that's how you grow. You grow when you realize that everything that looks pretty ain't pretty, and everything that glitters ain't gold.
Yeah. Even pretty people poop.
That's right.
And it took me a long time to see that. And then, as you said earlier, you said that heartbreak makes you more human. Mm-hmm. For me, I would definitely say it made me more human in understanding that even if someone falls short of meeting your expectations, that doesn't make them an indecent or a horrible person. So for me, not only was I kind of shy in coming to the realization that people aren't perfect, but, you know, I had a underdeveloped understanding that life isn't just black or white. Like, sometimes people do things that may offend you, and it's not because they want to offend you. Like, their intent isn't to say, oh, I'm going to wake up and hurt Lanisha today. Sometimes people are just acting out of survival, or they're trying to survive through their own traumas, or sometimes they're just putting themselves first.
For whatever, all those variables, yes, all of the above.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you can't really judge people by their intentions and not their actions. That's another advice of my mom. And we are quick to judge people by their actions.
Yes.
And I don't think there's a lot wrong with that either, in the sense, because when people show you who they are, believe them. Mm-hmm. But I also believe that you got to extend a little grace, because you don't know their story. The one thing I want to add about heartbreak too, I want you to make sure you know this, or that young women who are listening to this get it. Rewrite the narrative.
How do we do that? What do you mean?
In the beginning of heartbreak, and those however long it takes you to get through it, you're only remembering the bad things. You're only thinking about how he wasn't for you, and how all that's true, and God, whatever, all of that. Rewrite the narrative that I loved, and I learned, and I'm a better woman because of it. I learned who I am and the things that I'm willing to take, or the person I'm willing to be, and if I'm really in a position to love. Because sometimes women, to be just real, we are very good at deciding what we want, how we want it. And I'm wondering, instead, sometimes, if we're always thinking about the one, finding the one, if we have been on the journey to become the one. And if you're on a journey to become the one, then you're rewriting that narrative. You're changing the outcomes. I would contend today, I am going to be 52 years old, and I'm in a better position to love and be loved now than I was 10 years ago. Well, for many reasons, but one that I like to outline is that we're all imperfect people, and you get an opportunity to love with everything you have.
Yeah.
And if you lose in it, you really didn't lose, because you loved, and no one ever loses in love.
I know earlier when I started the broadcast, I said after chapter 4, we're going to venture into higher nobilities. And you gave this look like, well, I would challenge you there. I didn't miss that. Explain to me the nobility in love.
First of all, I'm a spiritual being, so you need to know that. But God is love. God created it. He perfected it. And there's nothing better than showing love, giving love, and also being loved. It is painful and precious. It makes you feel every emotion, and creates a space for you to do things you didn't even think you could do. So, why love is noble? One, because it was birthed by God, but more in a secular, worldly mindset, it creates a space for you to be. And nothing is more important than being loved and loving.
I think my idea of it is definitely still growing. So you have, 20 years plus than me to have had your idea developed and be supported by evidence through your life experiences. But when you think of someone who is homeless, right, we understand that on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, shelter is one of those very basic things you need to excel as a human being. And for me, when I think of love, I think of it as having a home. It doesn't matter if it's a modern home or not. It's a space that's meant for you intentionally to belong there.
It's your safe space.
It's your safe space. And I feel really sad when those homes become broken for whatever reason. And I think heartbreak is definitely one of those things that has the power to change you, but it also has the power to grow you in ways that you never imagined you would. And it's almost one of those things where you, as you said earlier, you don't plan for heartbreak, but how often do we really plan for our growth? I feel like life just kind of pushes us into the deep end.
Absolutely.
And so I think what I would say to any young lady watching is that there is still something good that can come out of this thing that feels so ugly right here in this moment.
Yeah.
And one day you will be able to have the perspective of saying like, wow, this love thing is so scary because you're undressing yourself. You're showing all of who you are. I feel like having a lover is almost like having a mirror. They see everything about you, both your good parts, but then the things that are probably less preferred, if you're judging by the world standards. They're seeing all of that. And it can be really scary to have someone that close to you.
It is. But I want to add to this right here and advice. This is not a question you've asked me.
Yeah, for sure.
But I want to say right here, as you grow and mature and move past heartbreak, you need to also remember in your life that if the people can accept the worst of you, they don't deserve the best of you, because you are all of those things. You know, I am the project girl from 1518 Inman Court, but I am also the condo woman, you know, where they get my car. I am all of those things, and if you can't get the best of me if you're not willing to also take the worst of me. And while I say that, I have to be willing to do that for the counterpart too.
Yes, and that's exactly, I was going to challenge you on it, because saying things is always easy, but knowing when to put them into practice is always the hard thing that I guess you would call discernment or wisdom, knowing when to apply that practical knowledge. I live in the Twitter age, right? So I get on Twitter every day and I'm bombarded by all of these different pieces of advice. And, you know, it's like, nah, you don't put up with this in a relationship. Nah, you don't put up with that in a relationship. Oh, that's just toxic tradition. And when you really undress it, here's what it's really saying. What would you say to someone that says, no, dealing with the worst of a man is not worth losing the best parts of yourself? What would you say to that? Because that's something that I would probably offer too.
Oh yeah. I would say I would challenge you, because I do, but I would say, so right now, what is the worst thing about you that you don't want someone to know? What is that? And I don't want you to answer it, but I would ask that question. What is it that you don't want someone to know? And what is it that you are ashamed of or regret or whatever? Do you want them to love that part of you also?
Sure, everybody would say yeah.
So that's how I would answer that to someone asking and saying that needs to be different. I'm not willing to whatever. And I do believe that people have to be willing to take the risk, and love is a risk. There's risk in love. It's uncertain. You don't know what each turn or bend is going to be, so there's always a risk in it. But what I know in my 50s that I didn't know in my 20s is that there is no perfect being. There is no perfect man, nor am I a perfect woman. I mean, one of my favorite friends says, well, he ain't Denzel Washington, but I ain't Halle Berry. I mean, I love her. She's in Tennessee, but she's like, you know, it just is what it is. And I think sometimes we put expectations on people that we don't put on ourselves. But if you are like us in ourselves. We already have standards that are really already extremely high and hard to meet anyway. And so I would be a little bit more gracious to myself. And first thing, I'm not going to take mistreatment. So you need to be, you need to quantify what I'm not willing to lose part of myself for. I'm not going to be mistreated. I'm not going to be abused. But can I extend some grace to someone who's always late?
Okay, that was a clear shot at me, first of all.
I dated a guy that was always late too. It was a pet peeve of mine.
Oh, I really thought that you were coming for me.
No. I dated a guy I dated a guy that was always late. And in our thing, he knew punctuality was a big deal for me. And so in my 20s and early 30s, I was like, then you don't care enough about me. You know that matters to me, and you don't care enough about me to adjust. That was my thinking. And there may be some truth, a little bit of truth to that. But what I didn't know was that in his life, in his home, they were always late to everything. That was not it wasn't intentional. It was it was all he knew. And when it's all someone knows, there should be a creative way to explain, this is why it bothers me so, instead of it being a nag and something. So so that's what I mean. And, I'd be a little bit more gracious in some things that I feel like I'm selling myself out on some of my standards, because not everybody's going to meet them all.
Yeah. And I think that's very weighted coming from you. Someone, and I say that meaning someone who does have a high level of expectation.
Yes.
And she does, I feel like the standard that she sets is the level of confidence she has in you to rise up to meet them, and she will encourage you very strongly to meet that standard. Mm-hmm. So for you to say, what did you just say about the standard? It's not selling myself out. How did you phrase that?
It's not selling myself out to extend some grace.
I love how you said that. And that makes me at 24 stop and say, because literally it's almost like I feel like I'm your replica. I come to her with relationship problems, and I'm like, oh, it's done. I'm pressing the end button. I'm sealing this thing. He did this, and she's like, you're all worked up over that. And I'm like, you're supposed to be on my side. I'm
always on her side. And I tell her I'm always on her side, but I don't always agree with her thinking about it.
Yeah. But for her, it gives my 24-year-old, perspective the permission to say, you know what, maybe it is okay to look at it from his perspective, And
to allow yourself to experience. The advice I want to give you on a little bit and others is we're always looking for the outcome instead of the outlook. And if we could, I don't always do it, so I'm always challenging myself on that, because we learn with Steve Covey, begin with the end in mind. Yeah. There's always a destination, and no, there's not always a destination. Sometimes it's just a journey, and I wish I knew that. I wish I knew that 20 years ago.
Wow. So I feel like that kind of tied right into the last question of, well, how do you overcome heartbreak? Maybe if we start with, maybe this is just a journey and not the destination.
Well, I believe that I wish the best advice I would ever give to young women today, that I would also give to myself 30 years ago, is enjoy. It sounds cliche, and it's like one of those yeah, but it is live life in the moments, enjoy the journey of it, and stop looking for the outcome. The outcome, they're all going to work themselves out. They're going to happen or not happen. Either way, you're going to deal with it. Live and enjoy the experiences. In the last 10 years, in my mid-30s, I came to a place that I would stop living up to everyone else's idea of me and live up to God's idea of me. When I made that statement, I don't know that I really captured what that really meant, but it kept permeating in my world. And what it really meant is that I would get to know who I really was and not what everyone else's expectations of me were. And I would find that space of safety within myself. And I wish I knew that I just wanted to enjoy the experiences. I did not learn that till I got to my 40s and could experience, you're just here for the experience. When I went to Paris, I mean, I'd always dreamed just because I have an imagination out the wazoo. And I'm like, I am going to go to Paris and have a date on the River Seine and, all of those things and eat crepes and drink hot chocolate. And I mean, that was so unrealistic. I went single and all those things, but believe it or not, one of the guys on the tour was, he was single too. We were not a couple. We didn't couple up, but he did ask me to go to the Eiffel Tower that night, and we got crepes, and it was one of those things that went ding, 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 ding. You're just living in the experience and the journey. It doesn't matter if you're going to get married and have children, because we're going to get married, have children, have 2 cars, live in this house. We create a whole narrative and book and everything for ourselves, and we ain't even had the first date.
Can I make a confession? And you can tell me if you did this in your younger years. When you meet a guy and you say, well, what's your last name? You automatically put it with yours in your head.
Oh, I used to, yes.
Say, oh no, he can't be a candidate. I can't write my last name in cursive like that.
Oh my goodness.
That was me. Or I'd be like, Lanisha, what? That doesn't sound right.
That doesn't flow.
Yeah. And I mean literally, and now I'm to the age where it's like, you are crazy. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
But no, it's something I definitely, I don't know. I think that's one of those weird girl confessions that you're not supposed to tell anyone. Maybe like your close circle of friends. But yeah, we do jump off into the deep end very early on.
We've gone to the wedding already.
Yeah.
Had children and everything.
Just waiting for him to get the invitation.
That's all.
So I would say the advice that I would give to a young woman going through heartbreak is be kind to yourself and don't always personalize the rejection, because sometimes all the time. I don't really like to make qualifying statements like that, but I would say from my experience, I have learned that it has nothing to do with you. So don't personalize the rejection, and understand that today's a dark day, but life is a circle. So while you're down here, it's only natural that you're going to come back up. It's only natural that a brighter day is going to come. So just be kind to yourself. In the book, I talk about how from day to day, I went through my journey. I did more community service. I try to exercise more, started spending more time outside of myself. But I'm not going to give you some regurgitated cliche like, oh, I just got up and everything was great. No, it took me a long time, and there were very dark days. Some days where I didn't want to get out the bed, some days where I allowed myself and afforded myself those days to just be cocooned inside of my covers and just cry and just let it out. I think it is important to feel those emotions and then release it. I guess I would say I learned to self-soothe. I think being able to kind of cradle yourself in those moments, I think that's super important, something that I learned. Right? And Dr. Reynolds, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to spend here on Life Lessons and Lattes. You actually just got back from a vacation,
Well, it wasn't a vacation, it was work.
It was work, but it was
Yes.
Palm Springs. But you
Palm
made some
Springs.
time
Yes.
to,
the
because
last
I got
day.
on Instagram and I saw her in a drop top
Oh,
going
yeah.
shopping.
Well, it was, I mean, when you're in California and the weather is 80 degrees in Palm Springs, we had just finished the conference at 10:30 that morning, and I was like, I am renting a convertible and driving down I-10 in a convertible. I mean, because when else am I going to have that opportunity? And those are the things I've learned in the last 10 years that, you know what, this moment's going to, it's just going to pass you by. You may not ever get here again. And that is, I mean, I did just get back from a conference. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, thank you for piltling in us and being a part of the conversation. I think it's super important. I think as single women, I think oftentimes it is easy for our voices to be dismissed. And I think one way to devalue or even find a way not to listen to a woman as she tells her story about love, it's to package her as a lonely person, as someone who is bitter, as someone who just can't let things go. Mm-hmm. But why I thought it was so important to have this conversation is because I feel like it's almost in dutiful service to young women who are trying to get through. You go through to get through. And so anytime that I can talk to a woman that's been through and she can give someone else, you know, the confidence to say, you're going to get through this. It's so important that I capture that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. We always need to, I'm intentional about speaking to young women because I don't know that we've done that enough. I think we, particularly Black women, we had within ourselves, we've always had to mask, you know, our feelings and things, and it's important to make sure that other young Black women know. But I would say, final words from me is that, you know, wake up every day with the mind, even in breakup, even in loss, in brokenness for whatever reason that will happen, not just because of heartbreak, but wake up every day thinking that the odds are in my favor because God wants things to work out for my good. And so if you get any nuggets today and you leave this conversation, the odds are in your favor. It may not look like it, but the odds are in your favor.
Yeah, that's really good. Someone's going to really take that into their spirit and they're just going to flourish. So thank you for sharing that. All right, now it is time for our fan feature. This is the portion of the show where we hear from our audience who has wrote us and told us their life lesson, one that has been recurring in their life. This life lesson is from John, who lives in Ohio, and his life lesson is this: you are the best friend you will ever have. Dr. Reynolds, what do you think about that life lesson from John? You are the best friend that you will ever have.
That's really profound. Here's what I would say to that. There's a lot of truth to that because you know you better than anyone. But there's also a lot of limits to that statement, and here's why. We're not always kind to ourselves. And one thing about your best friend, they're always looking out for you. They always make sure you get self-care. They always provide that little piece that matters to you. And him saying that, that's the way it should be, because you should provide those spaces to take care of you, because you know your worst and you know your best. And a best friend takes all of that and loves you anyway. So yes, love, be your own best friend.
Okay. Well, for me, what I take out of that, learn to live with you. our pastor, Reverend Dr. Cosby, he always says, if you can't live with you, what makes you think someone else wants to?
Amen.
And so one thing I would say, as I was going through my, my first heartbreak, I became very intentional about doing things by myself because, you might do things by yourself, but then you meet someone and you get a schedule with them. You guys are kind of in sync. And then it's like this big part of you goes missing. You feel like you're missing your other half. And so I had to learn how to get back into the habit and the routine of like, okay, doing things by myself, but just do it. I became my own best friend again. I would go see plays on Broadway when I lived in New York. I went out of the country. I went to Cancun. I go to concerts, dinner by myself, and then you might feel like it's so weird, but take you a book, take your earphones, listen to an audio book. I mean, there are ways that you can enjoy life by yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean
I do that.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean living in isolation, but it does mean being intentional about creating a healthy place of solitude for you.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think life has to begin with meeting someone.
No, and if you think that, change that narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts?
No, except for I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
My expectations, I do expect great things from her, but I also want to extend grace for her not to have unrealistic expectations of herself. Yes. You're doing just fine. Don't let anybody tell you that you're not. Your journey is going to include heartbreak and disappointments and brokenness, but it will also include love and adventure and excitement. So try to embrace them all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Love her so much. All right, please join me next week at 8 p.m. I will be joined by a very special guest, Dominique Ford, and we will be discussing Chapter 5 of my book, The Dutiful Shift of Now. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Love you. Bye-bye.
Bye.